Hello, eMLB Universe. The Insider's back. We took a break along with the commish closing his office to go on his honeymoon, but we are back. We are ready to talk some eMLB action, and it is now down 2 months into the season as we just ended the month of May in the eMLB Universe. And I got to say, I don't think the season is going as a lot of people expected. You look at the leaders of the division, I think only maybe two of them were kind of what we were talking about in our predictions at the beginning of the season. NL Central and NL West, maybe the only two that are like, okay, that makes sense. But like everything else is just it's all over the place. But anyway, I'm Andrew. I'm here as always with my co-host JR. How are you doing this evening?
Pretty good, Andrew. It's kind of nice to be back in the eMLB saddle here. You know, it was a little bit of a break there, well deserved vacation for the commish. Glad he had some good quality time away with his missus. But it's nice to have eMLB action back, and that means the Insider podcast back. So I'm looking
And,
forward to this.
and I think people were getting a little bit antsy about missing eMLB because we had a slew of trades come through right as Commish came back. People were like, I got to do something. I got to do something.
As
Honest-
usual, any time that people can have to talk trade, they will.
in my defense, the two trades that I made, both of the GMs approached me. I wasn't trying to be active. I was approached about these offers, so I'll just put that out there. But we will talk about a couple of these trades. We won't talk about all of them because a lot of we don't want to spend the entire time here. We are still trying to limit ourselves on the time, but we will get to a couple of those trades. But first, let us recap where the standings are at the end of May. About, let's say, what is it, a third of a way through the season? About
Yeah.
50 games played out of the 162 so far for most teams. So here, the two divisions that I was saying are kind of as expected, or at least you can argue that as expected, is the NL Central with the Chicago Cubs at 30-20, Cardinals 3.5 behind, Brewers 4 back, Reds 5.5. Pittsburgh fell off, unfortunately, from their strong 9-0 start down to 7.5 back. And then the NL West with the San Francisco Giants at 31-21. Padres 2.5 back there, Dodgers 4 back, and then you got the Diamondbacks and Rockies at 7-12 back. Everything else, not really as expected, at least from our perspective with our predictions. We got the Boston Red Sox in the AL East, tied with the Baltimore's tied with the Baltimore Orioles at 28-21. Yankees 4 back. The Rays, I think weren't they my World Series pick? I think they were my World Series pick. They're 5 back.
I definitely picked them to win the division.
I think I had them winning the World Series, if I remember correctly. And then the Blue Jays at 10.5 back. And then Minnesota Twins leading the AL Central at 29-20. Indians 3 back, Royals 4 back, Chicago 8.5 back, and Detroit, everyone's consensus favorite to win the AL Central at 8.5 back. Actually, I think that was my World Series winner, was Detroit. Either way, I'm screwed. And then the AL West, which is pretty much the potentially three best teams in baseball that get to beat up on the Oakland A's, essentially. And then you got Texas in there. Houston Astros with the best record in baseball at 37-15. Los Angeles with the second best record in baseball at 34-19. And Seattle they have the third best record in baseball at 31-20. San Francisco has one more loss than they do. So you have the three best records in baseball in the same division. Poor Oakland is having to deal with the onslaught coming from those three teams. I think that's a big reason why those three are all at the top, because the A's are struggling now. They're under new management. They've started making some moves, so hopefully we'll see that turn around. But that's a rough AL West. And you got the NL East with the Phillies on top at 27-22. We'll talk about them in a little bit with their trades that they made. They're trying to make some moves to keep that spot. Nationals under 500 in second place at 24-26. The Mets at 21-29, 6.5. Marlins are not in last, 7 back, and then the Braves at 7.5. I think I've already touched on a couple of these, but what are some standings that stand out to you? Pun not intended until I said it.
Yeah, I mean, the two biggest stunners for me have to be where the Rays and the Tigers are. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
at the beginning of the season, if anybody would have said the Yankees would be ahead of the Rays in the standings on June 1st, I think we would have kick them out of the league either for being crazy or just being too funny for their own good. Because
Commish would have used his soundbite at him.
yeah, that somebody could have made a lot of money betting on that to happen.
That
And
is for sure.
And the Tigers, I mean, 21-29. I mean that's a team who I think universally was pretty much picked to win the division. To your point, I think a lot of people had them going to the World Series. So to be where they are, man, that's rough. But I would say in that division, the Twins being in the spot they're in, I mean that's great to see. Them being in that spot even after trading away Royce Lewis in the offseason to your Cardinals. I think they've been a real great story so far in this first couple months.
So let me just say this, because you mentioned the Royce Lewis trade for the Twins and how they're doing well since then. I believe that the trade with Royce Lewis and what the Twins got back, I believe that's one of the best win-win situations I have ever seen in a trade, because the Twins got back a lot of pieces that filled holes in their lineup that made them a more complete team and has put them in this position at the top of their division. And Royce Lewis is playing like a freaking monster. Just to keep this in the May theme, the May National League Hitter of the Month was, in fact, Royce Lewis. I'm pulling up his stats right here. So Royce Lewis hit in the month of May, hit 402 with 10 home runs, 21 RBIs, and 25 runs scored. Now, if the rest of the St. Louis Cardinals could learn how to hit, we would be in first place right now. Okay, so I looked at the stats earlier because I was just evaluating where my team's at and what I might need to do in the future to try to make this playoff push. There are only 2 batters in my lineup that are hitting above league average in terms of OPS plus, and that's Royce Lewis and Benny Rodriguez. Everyone else is hitting below league average, below the 100 line in terms of OPS plus. And so thank goodness Royce Lewis is doing what he's doing, because he's kind of carrying the offense right now. But he may not even be the MVP right now, because your player over there in Cincinnati, Trey Griffey, is hitting up a storm over there too.
Yeah, Trey, here coming off May, second straight month where he's won, the the NL Rookie of the Month award. He's really kept plugging away. I mean, our team's been hovering kind of around the 500 mark. So, Royce doing what he's doing for a team that's a little bit more in contention for the division title. You probably have to give that a little bit of a nod, but. Trey Griffey really has definitely lived up to the hype at this point, and we're just hoping that from my standpoint and the Cincinnati standpoint that he can keep that up the rest of the season.
Yeah, we're looking live at the current statistics, and Trey Griffey and Royce Lewis are tied for the National League lead in WAR at 3.4 each. Lewis has a better batting average and on-base percentage, but Griffey has a better slugging percentage. So. That's kind of, honestly, that's kind of to be expected. Royce Lewis isn't really a power guy. He's an on-base guy. He's my leadoff guy. And then Griffey was coming in, looking to be a power hitter, especially at Great American Ballpark. So, but I kind of touched on the awards. Let's touch on the other awards that happened in the month of May. So in the American League, for the best hitter of the month, we've got the catcher out of Houston, Grayson Rowan, who hit 382 with 10 home runs, 25 RBIs, and 24 runs scored, leading the best offense in baseball in Houston. So kudos to Grayson Rowan there. I mean, there's probably a few batters you could have taken from that Houston lineup and said they could deserve the Player of the Month award, but he hit close to 400 this month.
Yeah, Houston has been scary good when you look at what their offense has done, in addition to what their rotation looks like, especially now that they picked up Joel Machado from Colorado. So. Ben, he definitely was somebody that, we kind of questioned in the offseason, how much he did with that team. And right now he's definitely proven all the doubters wrong, with that machine in Houston.
It just goes to show with eMLB or with out of the park baseball, literally things could flip on its head year over year, because this was not the offense in Houston. Houston's offense was their detriment last year. And this year, it's their strength. So And it's not like Houston really made any major additions other than re-rating Jordan Alvarez is who they
Yeah.
re-rated, which was a huge re-rate. But like in terms of the players, they're pretty much the same lineup, and they just figured out what they weren't doing last year all of a sudden. So it's just
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, guys like Kevin Prue. I mean, he's performing, way above what he did last season. Even a guy like Matt Chapman, is kind of returning to a little bit of form. Supplying some power with a decent average there. I mean, they're really cooking.
Absolutely. So on the pitching side, which as people have noted in the Discord, there seems to be maybe some rumors about the league juicing the baseballs this season. But aside from all that, we joke. By the way, I'm just going off of what used to be talked about in real life MLB. I'm not actually saying Kamish tweaked something like that. Ethan Candela over in San Francisco wins the pitcher of the month, 5-0 with a .63 ERA for the month of May, 33 strikeouts over 43 innings. And let's see, is he hitting as well as maybe not as well as he's pitching, but he's the two-way player over there. Nope, he's not really hitting that well, so we'll just focus on his pitching. Pitcher of the month, Ethan Candela out of San Francisco.
Yeah, Candela, I'm telling you, both of these guys have been tremendous. Candela is part of that amazing 1-2 combo there in San Francisco with him and Jandy Ronson. I mean, that duo really is carrying them right now. And then, you touched on...
Because it ain't their hitting.
Right, because it's not their hitting. You touched on Rosario in the American League. He's 9-0 in his last 9 starts. I mean, I know pitcher win-loss record is what it is, but when you're rattling off 9 straight wins, getting in 9 straight starts, that's a heck of a bounce back.
You're doing something right.
Yeah, so he's doing really well out there in Seattle after I think he had a little bit of a rough time in his first couple starts out there, but he has sure righted the ship for the Mariners.
If Jim Nutball Reed wasn't injured for the season, we would have a really awesome debate over what the best 1-2 punch in the rotation is in baseball between the San Francisco 1-2 punch and the Baltimore 1-2 punch. But we'll have to hold that conversation until next season when Reed comes back. In the AL, we have Rosario, who I think you just mentioned him. In the month of May, 6-0 with a 2.48 ERA. Bounced back from the struggling start that he had to start the season. Like you mentioned, 9 straight wins now. His ERA is still 4.31 overall, which kind of speaks to the atrocious start that he had. But good to see him bounce back here because that was one of the hot topics of the offseason was the trade for Rosario coming over to Seattle to lead that rotation. And Kansas City getting back Corbin Coe and how much better Corbin Coe was pitching at the beginning of the season. Now Rosario's like, all right, I figured things out. I know what I'm doing, and put in a pitcher of the month performance.
Yeah, he's been electric there, and I think combine him with Justin Fuller. Justin Fuller I believe was the AL pitcher of the month in April. So Seattle. Maybe having back-to-back award winners there, I believe. I know he started off really strong and has still continued to pitch pretty well.
Let me just double-check on that. Where is May awards or April awards? Yeah, Justin Fuller. So the Mariners have taken the first 2 pitchers of the month in the American League. We already touched on him, but the rookie of the month in the National League is, in fact, Trey Griffey. If he didn't get player of the month, he at least got rookie of the month. He hit .312 with 7 home runs and 20 RBIs for the Reds this month. I believe that's a little bit of a downtick from his first month where he got player of the month. But, I mean, what more can we say? We've already talked enough about Trey Griffey at this point, haven't we?
Right.
Unless you want to talk about him more because he's your player.
I don't want to be accused of any favoritism there.
I mean, is it an accusation if it's true? Anyway, shortstop Liam Spencer over in Boston is the American League Rookie of the Month. Hit .361 with a home run, 16 RBIs, and 18 runs scored. He is not going to be your power hitting threat that used to seeing over in Boston. But he's getting on base and he's getting driven in by the power bats behind him. He's setting the table over there with James LeBlanc, and then he's getting driven in by the likes of Danny Diaz and Mookie Betts and oh gosh, third baseman Devers. Yep, Devers.
Yeah.
I was blanking on his name. So Liam Spencer not putting up the power numbers that maybe Trey Giffey or Royce Lewis were, but definitely respectable. Hit for a high average, got on base quite a bit last month, and scored a bunch of runs for his team, who are now tied atop the AL East with the Orioles for the division lead. So those are your May award winners. So let's move on to the other news that we have been kind of teasing at this entire time. We had a handful of trades that went through, and we're going to focus on, well, I guess technically it's 3 trades, but 2 storylines, I guess we could say. The first one is the Philadelphia Phillies that we kind of teased at earlier. So the Phillies are currently leading the National League East, and they felt like they needed to get ahead of this and make some moves to try to make sure they hold on to this lead in their division. However, the first move they made I was scratching my head at this move, honestly. Well, actually, no, it was technically the second one. Because the first move they made that was announced was how they got, let me see. Can I get transactions? There we go. Where's the deal? Is it this one? Yeah, here it is. Trevor Story coming over from the Yankees. Yankees, despite being third place in their division, have started selling off pieces, which honestly was kind of expected. We expected them to do more of this last year, but they've started selling off pieces. Trevor Story being the first big name to moved over to Philadelphia for right-handed pitcher Dakota Donovan, minor leaguer Juan Aguilar, and then the same scenario with the taking the break. These moves both happened over the break. Philadelphia flipped another shortstop that they had in the offseason. That's the wrong Philadelphia deal. Where is it? Wait, where is it? Oh, there it is. Philadelphia's just made a ton of moves. I'm just looking at all of them. The major one, here it is.
It's a lot to keep up with.
He made 4 trades. Okay, I'm trying to find the right one. This is the one I was trying to find. It was moving Correa back to Houston, and so now it's like, okay, you added Story, you moved on from Correa. Is Story really an upgrade over Correa? Like, what do you think the logic behind these moves were?
Yeah, like you, when the Story move was first made, I was really scratching my head, knowing, you got Manny Machado, you got Carlos Correa, you got Brandon Dieter, you got Luis Garcia. I mean, you had a pretty packed infield. And I know when the deal was announced, there was some speculation that maybe Story was going to play first base since Jake Lamb and some other guys there hadn't necessarily played really great. But then, with the Correa trade, obviously that clears a spot where he had been playing a lot of third base. And so now it looks like, Manny Machado is settling back to third. Trevor Story is slotting in at second base. And then at shortstop, you got Luis Garcia, and they're still giving Jake Lamb the first base job. So, there's a lot of moving parts there. In the Houston deal, obviously, they get back Freudis Nova, who is a very versatile player who can give you some good play at a couple different positions. He's
very good bench player.
Very good bench player.
Very good utility player, essentially.
Yeah. Bobby Peluso, one of the guys that come back, an outfielder with some power, but not great contact. And then the other guy in return, is a young first baseman who still needs some development time in the minors. So, I mean, it's kind of surprising to see a guy the caliber of Correa get moved this quickly after signing a multi-year deal in the offseason. But I guess there was a thought there to kind of rearrange some things and see if it can jumpstart the offense. Time will tell. But you look at the roster and it's just a lot of kind of aging type players. Really, you got a lot of guys in their 30s who, just really aren't necessarily performing up to par. And I don't know how much this is gonna change that.
Yeah, and I just pulled up the deal that included. You mentioned Dieter, who honestly I would have kept and tried to kept playing in that middle infield aside from, was it Garcia? But he moves Dieter for what, 4 prospects?
Yeah.
Smitty Lyons, Steve Wilkinson, Sergio Maldonado, and Dan Lipsky. Who Lipsky's not really a prospect; he's 26 at this point. But regardless, a 4-player deal for Brandon Dieter, and again, I'm scratching my head here. You're leading your division, and it's looking like they're trying to get younger. Like you mentioned, they're on the older side. Do you think the Phillies don't believe in their team and they're just trying to reset and get younger and just maybe carry momentum in the next year? Like, these don't seem like moves that a division leader should be making.
Yeah, I just don't know why you would make some of those moves and then also get rid of Dieter. Dieter's only 26. He's playing pretty well. I mean, he looks like the type of guy that, when you look at all of these players, the Manny Machado, the Jake Lamb, Trevor Story, I mean, all of these guys are, approaching their mid-30s to where you just don't know how much more they have left in the tank. And that guy in a Brandon Dieter is somebody who has kind of proven himself, who could be around for a while still as part of that next round of your infield. So, I mean, they did get 4 players back, but I don't know that any of them have the potential to be a Brandon Dieter.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of when we talked about the offseason trades that the Atlanta Braves were making, another NL East team, where we were like, okay, you bring in the AL MVP in Verdugo, and then you shift Jose Ramirez to Kansas City. Like, those seemed like opposing deals. The first one, you're like, okay, we're into contention. Second one is like building for the future. I'm just like, what's going on? That's what it looks like it's doing here. You bring in Trevor Story, but then move Correa and Dieter for a bunch of prospects. And it's just like, what direction are you trying to go in here? I'm confused. And then just to quickly recap the 4th deal that it was kind of a minor one. Again, another, why are you bringing this person in? 33-year-old pitcher Kyle Crick, and just literally a straight up cash deal. Didn't even send a player back, just send $500K back to Toronto. And let's like Story and Crick, Correa and Dieter shipped out. And it's just like, I don't see the connection here.
and in the Crick deal, I mean, he still has 2 more years at just under $10 million after this season. So I mean, I know it's Philly; they have the money, in a lot of these cases. But at the same time, to your point, that strikes me as a deal you make to bolster your bullpen because you feel like
you're trying to make a push.
Veteran arm, can help you out, to try to win the division. So, there could very well be a plan there that we're not privy to, and we can't really connect the dots.
I'm sure there's a plan. I just can't tell what it is.
It seems like a lot of moving chairs around with some very similar parts, and I don't know at the end of the day if this makes you better either now or in the future.
Yeah, it's just kind of like a break even kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. Maybe the Phillies GM is an absolute genius, and they're going to run away with the NL East this year and set themselves up for the future with these prospects they got back. Who knows? Yeah. Who knows? Now that was technically I was talking about 2 major trades within that, but we ended up talking about 4 trades. So we pretty much covered most of the trades that happened. But the other big deal that happened involved Baltimore and San Diego, and that is this one right here. So Baltimore sends Connor Siebold, who they got from Kansas City last year, and sends him over to San Diego in return for very expensive, highly paid, but very solid catcher Francisco Mejia and 21-year-old pitcher, minor leaguer Dan Walker. And as a note, Dan Walker is a community created player of GM Brendan McGuirk of the Orioles. So that was a big pull for him. So he gets his CCP and a very expensive catcher, albeit a good catcher in Mejia, and sends over Seabold to San Diego, who San Diego, if you look at their performance this year, they need some pitching help. And this definitely fits that mold. So what do you think was the mindset of the two GMs on this one?
So, from the Baltimore perspective, I know, Brendan has kind of built up a little bit of pitching depth there. So it doesn't surprise me to see him, looking to take advantage of the way Seabold's been pitching to try to move him. And hey, I mean, he ended up with a pretty good haul there. I mean, not only is Dan Walker his CCP, he's already a top 50 eMLB prospect. I mean, he's already, a pretty highly rated. Francisco Mejia. Now that's the one that could have some issues trying to fit in. We've talked before about Baltimore. They already have Will Smith. They have Jeff Newkirk, catcher, who's young catcher, their catcher of the future, who has struggled a little bit this year. So maybe he ends up going back to AAA to try to work on his swing a little bit while they bring Mejia in there. From San Diego's perspective, definitely Seabold should give their rotation a boost. I think, it sounds like we'll see Yasiel Sierra go back to the bullpen where he started the season and has pitched pretty well to make room for Seabold in that rotation. And that's going to fit in well. They can probably absorb the loss of Mejia with that offense, but also that's a good move for them in terms of looking to the future, where they know here pretty soon, you're going to have to sign Fernando Tatis Jr. and the Kims to some long-term deals. And I know
and Franmil.
So I know from this past offseason, Steve was looking to make some moves to potentially open up some payroll with that future in mind. So, I mean, it's a little costly having to give up Dan Walker along with Mejia, but you get a really good starter back in return that you have this year, and you have most likely one more season of control in 2027 as well.
Yeah, and not only that, the Padres have been extremely active at the trade market early on this season, because along with this deal, they traded for Dylan Carlson from the Cardinals, flipping a center fielder prospect, Mickey Chapman, back to St. Louis, who St. Louis, we used Dylan Carlson as our re-rate, did not go as well as I expected it to, and was not hitting very well. And of course, he comes over to San Diego, and in his first 3 games hit his first 2 home runs of the season. I'm not salty. But also, in order to make room in the finances for the Mejia trade, Baltimore flipped Jake Bauers to St. Louis, who had a hole to fill, moving Carlson to San Diego. So you could technically see this as like a kind of like a 3-team trade, even though it wasn't negotiated as a 3-team trade, because St. Louis moved Carlson to San Diego, which made room for Bauers to come join St. Louis to help offload some of that salary from Baltimore to take on the Mejia salary from coming over from San Diego. So you can see how it all connected there, and that's we'll see if Bauers does better than Carlson for the Cardinals. I mean, there's no pressure, 4th outfield spot on an expiring contract. I mean, he's got to play well if he wants to get a contract next year. But he's not going to be in my starting lineup every day, so it wasn't really a big deal to me. Plus, I got an extra prospect, and I moved Kaiser over to Baltimore, who's not a bad player, but was a 4th outfielder for me. And I brought up defensive superstar Luis Contreras up to the majors as well. But the Padres, back to them, they're aggressive this year. They also added Matt Wallner earlier this season in a trade with Cleveland. This is the National League. They are trying to be as good as the Cubs in terms of offensive production. And you look at their stats right now, they are top 5 in most offensive categories right now. Cubs are kind of leading the way offensively on the National League side. We already talked about the Houston Astros absolutely running away with every single offensive category over there in the AL. But it's looking like teams are not afraid to make moves early in the season. Now, I wouldn't call these blockbuster. They're kind of maybe like a step down from blockbuster because like Seabold and Mejia are not unknown names. They're definitely some high names there, but most of the people moving are like those role player guys like Carlson, like Bowers, like and a bunch of prospects. But then Philly just came in here just as like, I'm going to make big moves and see what people think about
it. Right. Yeah. And San Diego, I think, that's a team, who, well, I'm sure we'll talk about them when we get into the power rankings a little bit more, but with Seabold, if he can help balance out that rotation a little bit more, that might be the most balanced team in the entire National League at the end of the day, with the combination of their offense. They already have a really, really good bullpen, and if that rotation can start to shape up a little bit, I mean, that's a team that you might be hard pressed to find some holes in.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm not really speaking very good English.
We're knocking the rust off, Andrew. We're knocking the rust off a little bit here.
I shouldn't have any excuse because we've recorded a couple Joes on the Pros episodes, but whatever. It's a Monday for us recording this, so those are the big news stories across the eMLB. We are now into the month of June. We are starting to get into the dog days of summer. So maybe the pitching will try to finally figure out how to get batters out instead of giving up all these home runs they seem to be giving up. But that's basically our recap. So why don't we move on to everyone's favorite segment, the power rankings?
Yeah.
I have a feeling that these are going to be some interesting power rankings because there's a lot of teams that have very similar records right now, similar performances. I mean, the top of the power rankings might not be that crazy.
Yeah, that'll probably be pretty predictable once we get there. But
yeah, let me pull up the new power ranking tier list. Boom. Reset for the month of May. I should have taken a screenshot of where we set it last month so we can figure out who's moving up and moving down. But who cares? It's been a month.
It's been so long. It might as well be another season.
I mean, I can already tell you that I had the Pirates on my first list because of their strong start after the month of April. They ain't on the top 10 anymore. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that right now. They are not on the top 10 anymore. And I'm sorry, the Yankees also fell off my top 10. I think I had them at like 8 or 9, something like that. But I'll go ahead and start out with my number 10 team. And that is where are they? Got to look through all the logos and find them. The Boston Red Sox. Leading their division, tied with Baltimore right now. And but I think Baltimore is still a better team right now. I think with Boston, they still have that weakness when it comes to pitching. They have allowed the 12th most runs in the American League. They have the worst starter ERA in the American League. And it's the same story as last year. This is a team that doesn't flip what's going on, and they actually keep their performance consistent. They are being carried by their offense, and I don't think that's a recipe for success. The only pitcher that's really having success right now is their free agent signing, Matthew Thompson, who had not pitched anywhere above, was it Double A ball, I think it was? Yeah, hadn't pitched above Double A and got signed to a $10 million contract. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't interested in signing Matthew Thompson this offseason. But once the price got like above like $8 million, I was just like, okay, what's going on here? Turns out that that's honestly not a bad deal right now for the way he's pitching. But the problem is the rest of the rotation is, I'm just going to say, it's pitching like garbage right now. So despite the fact that they are tied for a division lead, I have them at number 10.
Yeah, that Red Sox rotation, you look at some of those numbers of these guys, and you just look at their ranks, and you're just like, how are they 28 and 21?
Yeah, it's their offense. It's their offense. The only team that's doing better offensively than them are the Houston Astros, and the Astros just have better pitching. That's the difference.
Oh, yeah. So for me, I actually have your St. Louis Cardinals.
You put me in the top 10?
I did put you in the top 10.
I didn't even put myself in the top 10.
I will go ahead as a way of talking about that. Say I do not have the Phillies in my top 10, even though
I don't have the Phillies in my top 10 either.
Okay, so it kind of
Sorry, Phillies.
Yeah, it kind of came for me down to Phillies or Cardinals here at the end. And even though the Phillies have a slightly better record, I believe, they have a negative run differential of negative 15 at this point. The Cardinals are at least plus 17. I mean, I don't have any faith in that Phillies team right now to continue to play like that. But
yeah, just to speak to the stats you're referring to, the Phillies have a minus 15 run differential, and their the Pythagorean record based off of their run differential. They have 4 more wins than they should right now.
Yeah. So, the idea that they can keep that up, I'm not on that train. But I think when you look at the Cardinals, I mean they're in you're in a tough spot having lost Jonathan Loaisiga and Jack Flaherty both to injuries. But
and, one of my replacements did not do too well in his first start of the season.
Yeah. But again, we talked Royce Lewis playing really, really well, carrying that team right now. Benny Rodriguez has been playing great, and I have to think it's only a matter of time before Acuna, Andrew Alexander, your CCP, and Joe Adele. You're going to get something out of those guys. Dom Aguilera, none of those guys are really stepping up to play to their potential just yet, and yet you're still performing right there, not far behind the Cubs, so far 26 and 23. So I still have a lot of faith in that Cardinals team.
Despite the injuries to the rotation and the downgrade of what's happening with Jeremy Frank, he is pitching a lot worse this year than he did last year. We still have the second best ERA in the National League in terms of starters, led by a bounce back season from Jonathan Stever. I just didn't put my team in the top 10 because we haven't put together consistent performances yet. We had an under 500 record in April. We bounced back with a over 500 record in May for sure. But I just look at that lineup and they're performing way below where they should. I kind of agree with you. It seems like only a matter of time before they finally start to figure out how to hit, especially Acuna. He's actually one of my worst hitters. But I will say age is kind of catching up with Anthony Rendon right now. He is not performing well. He's getting up there in age. I'm glad he's in the last year of his contract, to be honest. But I'm actually shocked that you put my team in the top 10. I did not have my team in the top 10. So then who do you got at number 9 then?
So at number 9, I have the Padres. I do think they're a team that's positioned to rise, from there quite a bit, potentially.
See it on here.
But
it's there, I promise.
But like we talked about, I mean, they're a team that's getting a whole lot right now out of Franmil Reyes, out of Asher and Unikim are both playing really well. They did trade Mejia, but they've got Allison Quintero, who can handle the catching duties there. So I don't think you're going to see a big fall off there. Their bullpen has been really a lockdown part of their team, and I think adding Connor Siebold, again could really stabilize that rotation and shore that up, and at that point, they're really going to be a tough out.
All right, so for me at number 8, I've got an NL West rival in LA. So with the Dodgers, they had a strong start to their season. They've been kind of falling off lately, which is why I have them down here at number 9. They've had a really rough stretch of games lately, including they got swept by the Cubs. Here's the rough way, probably the roughest way to end a month I've ever seen. They lost 4 straight games, 3 to Chicago, 1 to St. Louis. 3 out of the 4 games win at least 15 innings. And all of them ended up in losses. And one of those games, they gave up 8 runs in the top of the 16th to the Cubs. Yikes! Not only that, they lost 2 out of 3 to St. Louis, 2 out of 3 to San Francisco, and split 2 out of 4 against Miami. So they kind of struggled to end the month of May. But up until that point, they were they were close to being a division leader right alongside the San Francisco Giants. I think this team is still a good team. I just think that their pitching is not playing the way that people expected them to. It's kind of like the situation with the Cardinals where their offense is underperforming. I think the Dodgers pitching is underperforming, and I think they should be able to figure it out eventually. And once they do figure that out, watch out because their offense is still doing decently well. They, despite having a low batting average and on base percentage, they have the third most runs scored in the National League due to the fact that they are leading the National League in home runs. So even though they're not really getting people on base, they are still hitting a lot of home runs to score those runs. Now, as long as the pitching can figure it out, they'll start winning more games, and hopefully maybe they can get on base more.
Yeah, that's what worries me about their offense is just how reliant they've been on the home run so far, and knowing that in that NL West, it's not exactly a other than Colorado, it's not exactly a division full of ballparks conducive to hitting a lot of home runs. So
That's fair.
they're definitely going to have to figure out some ways to get some runners on base and score some runs without the power of the homer.
But along the lines of what you just said for your team at number 9, I have the Padres actually at number 8 for kind of the same. I mean, I don't really have any more to add than what you said. They're performing well. They are in second place in their division right now. They kind of limped out of the gate to start the season, but have come on strong lately. And I think I agree with you that adding Seabold to that rotation should add some stability. They have the best bullpen in baseball in terms of ERA, but their starters had been one of their weak spots, so they bring in Seabold to address one of their weak spots. Maybe they miss Mejia behind the plate, although he wasn't throwing out runners at as good of a clip as he was in years prior. But regardless, they have a very strong lineup that is top 5 in the NL in offense, and if Seabold gives them the addition to the rotation that they're looking for to get that on track, this is going to be a very strong team.
Yeah, that could very well be. So for me at number 8, I actually do have the Red Sox here, so I have them a little bit higher than you did there. Again, we talked about the rotation and everything. What I think has really helped them this year, we talked about Liam Spencer being the rookie of the month in the AL for May. He's really taken over that shortstop job from Xander Bogaerts. And now when you look at him at short, Danny Diaz and Devers, kind of splitting third base and DH, and then Douglas at first base and James Blunt at second. I mean, that might be as good of an infield as there is, in the American League, or potentially, in all of eMLB with all of those guys strong at all those positions. So, I think that's still continuing to carry their offense. I still maybe it's the old traditionalist in me. I just still struggle with the idea that they're gonna be able to contend with a pitching staff that's performing like this. So I think they're really gonna have to see some improvement there.
But we know the GM of the Red Sox is not afraid to make a splash in terms of making a move for pitching, adding Noah Syndergaard last year, which we all thought was the perfect move for them to shore up that rotation. But the problem is that Syndergaard is kind of laying an egg right now in terms of pitching this season. He has almost an 8 ERA. A little bit of that is bad luck, as his FIP is down at 5.75, but that's still not a good number. So he's giving up over 2 home runs per 9 innings right now, which is scary. It kind of goes along with that narrative of the juice baseball this year.
Right.
But regardless, he was supposed to be the ace of this rotation. He's got a 7.68 ERA. That is not a recipe for success.
Yeah.
So who do you got at number 7, though?
So number 7, I have the Orioles here, the Baltimore Orioles here. They're just a notch above the Red Sox there. And I think for me, the biggest reason for kind of putting them above the Red Sox, even though they have the same record and are tied there atop the division, I do like the balance of Baltimore's team, just a hair more with their pitching staff, and then they still have a really good offense. We've mentioned Rendon a couple times as the GM there. He definitely has the philosophy of, I want pitchers that get outs, and I really don't care how they get them. So the staff is definitely one that will make you earn your runs. They lead the AL in fewest home runs allowed, fewest walks issued. So they're not going to give you runs. You're going to have to earn every run you get against them, even though they're not going to strike out a ton of guys and overpower teams.
And
But I still like
also,
that quite a bit.
even with all that, even moving the AL MVP Alex Verdugo over to the National League, they still have a top 5 offense in the AL, and that's why I also have Baltimore at number 7. Yeah, just for all the reasons you said, they have a solid rotation. Now we'll have to see how well they do after losing Seabold.
Right.
Maybe the prospect they got back is ready for the majors. Maybe not. Maybe it's on the cusp. I don't know. Now, the part that scares me, however, is their defense. Their defense is one of the worst defenses in the American League. Their pitching could have been a whole lot better if they had a better defense behind them. They are second in the American League in fielding independent pitching, but they are fifth in terms of starter ERA and ninth in bullpen ERA. So you have to think if they had a better defense behind them, they might have a bigger. Well, they wouldn't be tied. They'd probably have like a 4 or 5 game lead, maybe at this point. Maybe not that many games, but the point is that that's why they're down here at number 7. We both had them at number 1 in our last power rankings because they got off to a really hot start in the first month of the season, but they've definitely cooled off of late. How did they do in May? They went under 500. They were 13-16 in May after a 15-5 April start. So
Yeah, and
that
to your
defense is worrying to me.
and to your point, I mean, if you look, their BABIP is 15th in the AL.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. Just kind of furthers my point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, despite having a top 5 offense and allowing, where's their runs allowed? They just outside the top 5 in terms of runs allowed, but they could be top 5 in terms of pitching runs allowed if their defense was better. So maybe I just realized they just added a defensive player in Louis Urquiza. He is a defensive first center fielder, can play any of the outfield spots. He's not going to wow you with the bat, but for me, he was the perfect bench player. Could defensively play any of the 3 outfield spots. Was usually a better defender than who was there before, except maybe Joe Adell in center. And well, actually no, I had a Gold Glover in left too. But either way, he is an above average defender, close to elite. So maybe that's one of the big reasons that's the player that they got back in the Jake Bauers deal, was to try to shore up some of that defense. So maybe we'll see Urquiza being played a lot more consistently than he was in St. Louis. So number 6 for me, we're going to go to the story of the season in Minnesota as my number 6 team. They are one of the surprise stories. I know you picked them to make the playoffs, but you picked them as a wild card team. You didn't pick them to win a division. That is, if memory serves me
Correct.
So right now they are leading the American League Central, and they're doing it. I'm just gonna say they might have a little bit of luck on their side because their offense is not the strongest. Their bullpen is literally the worst in the American League, maybe in baseball. I didn't compare it to the National League, but their starters are some of the best It's one of the best rotations in baseball right now. And if they can balance out the bullpen with their starting pitching, they could get even better. And if they can find some more offensive output somewhere, their leading hitter, I would say, probably is Kirilloff. Is that who's leading?
Yeah, Kirilloff. Yeah, Kirilloff and Laron Smith. If you want, I have them at number 6 also. If you want, you can go ahead and pop them up there.
Makes it simple.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, they really have been carried offensively by those two players. I mean, everybody else, there hasn't really been too much of a standout from that point.
Hey, but they have more batters above 100 in OPS plus than the Cardinals do. They have 4 and the Cardinals have 2. And 2 of those players are the 2 Cardinals that got moved to Minnesota.
Yeah, so
one of them is. Sorry, one of them is.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting. I mean, I think, the 3 starters could really continue that throughout the course of the season. They may, if they're not able to get more offense, they may need one of the other starters to really step up and really be, a little bit more of a rotation-led team. And, if they can figure out the bullpen part, they may have to rely a little bit more on that to carry them. But 19-8 in May, they're definitely hot right now.
Yeah, and this might be a team that people were suspecting that this was a team on the rise, but maybe not ready. Kind of like the Royals last year, where they were a team on the rise, but not necessarily ready to contend for a division. The Minnesota Twins might be the Kansas City Royals of last year. Well, I guess the Kansas City Royals of this year. Last year's Kansas City Royals this year. You know what I mean.
Right.
A team that we figured would be making some strides this year to show improvement, but not necessarily make the playoffs, except you had them in as a wild card team. So yeah, if they might be in the market to adding some bullpen pieces, maybe adding another bat to go along with Kirilloff. So we'll see how aggressive GT, the GM of Minnesota, is coming up with June and July, getting through to the trade deadline. But positive signs so far, and definite areas that they can see where they need to improve if they want to take that next step and compete and try to put themselves in World Series contention, not just division contention.
Right.
All right, so who you got at number 5?
So number 5, I have the Chicago Cubs. I have them slotting in here. You know, that big time offense of theirs, you know, obviously has been leading the way for them. Kind of, you know, a little bit of a similar story in a lot of ways to the Red Sox, where they have a really tremendous offense, and you know, their pitching staff is a little bit better than the Red Sox. I say a little bit.
I mean, that's not saying much.
That's not saying much. But you know, definitely another you know, offense heavy team. You know, they've had a couple of solid months here, 16 and 13 in the month of May. So you know, they've still been holding steady a little bit there. So I think they're still, you know, in a solid spot, you know, to continue to be a winner. But I definitely think you know, that Jake's going to want to make some moves potentially regarding the pitching staff, if some of these guys don't start pitching a little bit better.
I'm honestly surprised that Jake was more aggressive towards adding bats in free agency than he was towards pitching. I would have
Absolutely.
thought maybe I feel like he would have been one of the guys in on, was it Framber Valdez?
Yeah.
That ended up back in Detroit. Maybe he was, and I mean, he ended up back in Detroit, so there's no way of knowing how close the Cubs were to signing him. Maybe he was going after Framber, but I feel like he would have prioritized adding Framber over a bat like Brendan Rodgers, because pitching was your bigger need. And we're seeing that right now with the Cubs. And I'll get back to the Cubs because my number 5 team is San Francisco. So I'll touch on San Francisco real quick. Basically, the San Francisco and the Cubs are kind of polar opposites. You have the Cubs with the offense and a struggling pitching staff, and then you have the opposite, which is the Giants with a struggling offense going with a strong pitching staff. The reason why I think, and honestly, I debated about who to put at 4 and who to put at 5. I'll go ahead and tell you I've had the Cubs at 4. I debated flip-flopping them. Honestly, you could call them tied for me if you want to. Ultimately, I think I put San Francisco at 5 because their pitching doesn't seem to be as dominant as the Cubs hitting. And that's kind of where, like, I looked at the two strengths. Okay, which one am I more afraid of right now? And I think the Cubs hitting is a little bit more scary than the Giants pitching, but not by much. And like I said, this is barely. I could flip flop the two of them easily. And at the end of the day, the Cubs also have, I think, like 1 game better record. I think as well. No, well, they're technically tied because the Giants have played 2 more games, but they have 1 more win and 1 more loss. So they're break even there. Not really helping my case at all. But back to the Cubs.
The Cubs are percentage points better.
Yeah, percentage points better. But back to the Cubs. They are first in pretty much every offensive category except for home runs, and they're second in batting WAR, which also takes into account fielding. So their fielding is actually bottom of the NL. It's kind of like the same situation with the Orioles. Like, you're performing well, but your defense is a little bit scary. Defense might be more of a concern for the Cubs than pitching, because maybe that's one of the reasons why their pitching isn't doing so well, is because they don't have a good defense behind them. Now, Danny Smith Jr. is not going to be the problem. He's a defensive stud, but the rest of the players out there, they could help out with that pitching staff if they improve their defense there. So maybe that's one of the downsides of going after players like Brendan Rodgers, although he's primarily been a DH at this point. But that, I mean, like I said, Cubs, Giants, I pretty much have them equal, one than just having opposite strengths of each other. But I had to put someone at 4 and someone at 5. So I just put, I kind of just, okay, I have to face the Cubs. I'm a little bit more scared of them. I'll put them at 4.
That's very fair reasoning. Very fair reasoning.
Not necessarily going along with my logic mindset, but I had to make a choice somehow.
So for me at number 4, I actually have the Seattle Mariners there. So
Right.
I have Seattle. You know, the Mariners squad. That's another squad that in the preseason predictions I thought would be going to the postseason. Right now they're at 3rd in their division, but as we talked about, you know, it's a division stacked full of the best records in the American League. So
In baseball.
yeah, in baseball, yeah. So you can't really blame them too much. You know, we talked, you know, already about Rosario and Fuller, but you know, injury in Manrique, Ryan Shaw have both been okay in that rotation, and I think, you know, have the potential to play better. On the offensive side, you know, you got a pretty good catching duo there with JT Realmuto and Shea Langoliers, along with, you know, a lot of the names we've talked about before. Your Pedro Serrano, your Eric Kelly, you know, Matt Olson, you know, is actually, you know, hitting pretty well there after a re-rate in the offseason. So, you know, Hetz has a pretty good squad there playing well, and you know, if who knows what their record would be if they were in another division and where they might be, but I think he's still got to feel pretty good about how his team's doing.
I mean, literally, if they were in any other division, they would be leading that division. But they're 3rd in the AL West.
Yeah, it's crazy. But so at 3, I have the Giants there. I have the Giants a little bit higher. I'm really, I guess you could say, I'm really bullish on that Jandy Ronson, Ethan Candela combo.
That's a scary duo.
You know, after seeing what the Ethan Knight Jim Reed combo did last year, I feel like, you know, that duo is something that could really carry them a ways. I mean, it and also not to mention that in the kind of the 3rd slot there in that rotation, Jeremy Hoxie has pitched really, really well also. So, you know, they're really kind of getting a good trio there in that starting rotation, which is making up for some of their struggles offensively. You're getting Michael Sean Kane kind of hitting how we thought he would, hitting pretty well. You know, they're getting a lot out of Aaron Nixon and Matt Toke. I think the area that they're going to really want to get some more production from is that outfield. They're just really not getting much out of their outfield offense, and that could be something that Sean Paxler looks to address as we get closer to the trade deadline.
All right. So at number 3, I couldn't resist just putting 3 AL West teams in the top 3 of the power rankings. It was just too good. It's just too good. So I've got the Mariners at number 3. Like you mentioned, very strong team so far, especially when it comes to Rosario finally finding his form after a hard start. Justin Fuller, pitcher of the month for the first month. Now, they definitely have areas where they need to improve. So I kind of compare them to the Dodgers. When I talked about them earlier, I talked about how they score runs because they're hitting the home run. That's the case here in Seattle. The difference is that Seattle is pitching better than LA, and it's brought them to the third best record. Again, I can't speak tonight. Third best record in baseball, which unfortunately is in the same division as the top 2 records in baseball.
Right.
They are definitely scary. They're hitting very well. If the bottom of their lineup could start producing more, they'd be even scarier. But right now, Javier Baez, Reggie Allen, Adalberto Mondesi are not really scaring anybody. So as long as you can get through the big 3, big 4 really, of Clark, Kelly, Serrano, and Olson, and you can even add in Judge Dozier maybe. Once you get past that, you're like, okay, let's get through the last of the lineup and kind of reset ourselves and let's do it again. Because they're not really doing much down at the bottom of the lineup. If they can fix the bottom of the lineup production, if they can fix some holes in their pitching staff, because they have really good top performers, but the rest of their pitching staff isn't is maybe league average or worse. They have a lot of potential to go far. They could also use some help in the bullpen, but the record speaks for itself. Third best record in baseball, third best team in my power rankings. And then at number 2, I'm just going to go on record of order here. I've got the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Again, if they were in any other division, they would be leading it with a record of 34-19, second best record in baseball, led by a top 5 offense and a top 5 pitching staff. You could argue this is the most balanced team in baseball. And the only reason that they don't have the best record in baseball right now is because the Astros are astronomically at the top of the hitting categories. Sorry, that was too bad. I thought about that. Just that was. I didn't plan that. Was that impressive?
Their offense has been out of this world.
There you go. So despite that, Angels are more balanced than the Astros, and we'll get to the Astros in a minute. But the Angels are putting up a top 5 offense and a top 5 pitching in the American League, and the only reason they're not at the top of my power ranking is because they don't have the best record in baseball. Plain and simple.
Yeah. Same here for me. I have the Angels there at the number 2 spot, and then obviously we both have Houston at the top spot. The Angels. Yeah, you might as well go and add them on there. The Angels have a squad that's pretty interesting in that 2 seasons ago he had Shohei Ohtani win the AL Cy Young Award, and now he's the third best pitcher on that team behind Sean Clisby and Asa Lacy. Both of those 2 guys pitching really well.
And that Lacy deal, bringing him over from the Dodgers.
Oh man,
that was a good move.
Great move by Tom there. Tom has really done a good job with his team. Retooling at the right time. He traded Drew Mendoza away in the offseason, and Luis Ramos has been hitting well in that first base spot. He's gotten a lot out of Sam Bianco in that middle infield, another young guy that's come up there. Mike Trout still hammering out home runs, getting on base. I mean, he's still contributing quite a bit there. So
and somehow Andrelton Simmons has 5 home runs in the first 2 months of the season. Like what the heck?
Yeah. So good squad there, but again, Houston right now are the kings of the eMLB, at least for the time being. And Ben hasn't been resting on it either. If you look at some of these moves here recently, we talked about the deal that they made to pick up Correa. He's also added to that rotation. He's picked up Joel Machado from Colorado. He's picked up Fraser Perez from the Yankees, and already going along with Corbin Martin and Forrest Whitley.
Those 2 moves are a couple of risky moves because both of them were not playing well to start the season on their respective teams. Now, you might give Joel Machado a little bit of a, all right, you're pitching in Colorado kind of thing, but Machado has over a 7 ERA, Perez has almost a 7 ERA, so you're like, okay, you're adding these pitchers, but can you count on them to pitch better than what they were? And I think that's the risk that Houston's taking. Now, I mentioned that Los Angeles probably has the most balanced team. Technically, Houston does have both the most runs scored and the least runs allowed, but their starting rotation has been a sore spot for them. They are about in the middle of the American League when it comes to starter ERA, and I think part of that, they have a meh defense, so that could contribute to it, but they do have, in terms of ERA, the best bullpen in the American League. So while I called the Angels the most balanced team, the Astros are right up there with them. They just have a couple of tweaks to make, and they could surpass LA as the most balanced team. I just think LA has a little bit better of a defense and a little bit more consistency out of their starting rotation. But, I mean, both of them are right there with each other.
Yeah. One thing that I found interesting with the Astros is if you look, a lot of their guys that are really providing the punch offensively are left-handed bats. And so their record against right-handed pitchers is 32-11 so far this season. So that's a 744 clip for those paying attention at home.
All right, so note to self: get more left-handed pitching. All right.
So if you're in the American League, I suggest getting some left-handed pitchers to combat that, which
I mean,
a
I
guy
have
like
to do that.
Angel Lacy can.
I have to do that with the Cubs. They're pretty much only left-handed hitters either, as well. So
Yeah, so
I'm already thinking about doing that, but I still have only one lefty in my rotation. So what does that say about me?
yeah, it'll
Hard
be
to come by.
it'll be interesting to see if what Houston is able to keep up with on this offense. I mean, Grayson Rowand obviously is a superstar for that team, but can your Jordan Alvarez, can that re-rate keep him going? Kevin Prue, Alejandro Pa. I mean, there's a lot of these guys are contributing, so we'll see if those guys can keep that up.
I keep talking about like how the Cardinals have only 2 players above 100 in terms of OPS plus. The Astros only have 3 players below 100 in OPS plus, and 2 of them are at a 96 and a 95. So, that's scary. That is the. I thought the Cubs were going to have the scariest offense coming into this season. Astros are scarier than I even imagined the Cubs would have been. It's just insane what production they're getting throughout the entire lineup. It's not just 1 or 2 players; they're getting production from everybody.
Yeah,
it's insane.
Yeah, it's up and down that lineup right now, and I mean that's what makes them really dangerous because you look at the rotation like you talked about. That was probably their weak spot, especially with losing Aaron Nola, and here Ben's already gone out and picked up 2 what we deem at least quality starters, if not. And a guy like Machado who has the talent to potentially be a front end guy.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Machado, he does have an over a 7 ERA, but he has an under 5 FIP. So again, the Colorado effect when it comes to pitching might be one of the best moves for Machado to make. Fastball pitcher, gives up a lot of high exit velocity, would probably do better in a stadium like Houston than in Colorado. So probably a good move on their part.
And you just never know how sometimes guys will react. Both of those guys coming from teams who not much was expected of, haven't really performed that well for a couple of seasons. Sometimes going to a new team, a team that's winning, a team with a chance of the postseason, that can really energize guys to really pick up their play.
Absolutely. Well, there you have it. The post-May power rankings from both myself and JR. Fairly similar across the board. The only difference is we had 9 of the 10 teams the same, just in different orders. You had my Cardinals in at number 10, which I'm still shocked about. I still feel like we have a long way to go before we make the top 10. And then I had the Dodgers in at number 9 instead of having the Cardinals in there. So, but both of us agree that Houston and LA are the top 2 teams. And what the heck, AL West, y'all are going to kill each other by the time the playoffs come. It's going to feel bad for the 2 teams. It's looking very strong that my prediction of the 2 wildcard teams coming out of the AL West will come true. And sorry for the 2 teams that don't end up winning the division, because if this keeps up, you could have the number 2 and number 3 best record in the American League and could end up playing in a wild card game, and that would be crazy to think about.
Yeah,
I don't like the wild card game. We need to go to 3 series, but that'll change whenever we get to expansion next year. Ooh.
Expansion.
So I think it was you that made a good point. Like, there are a lot more trades going on in division, and you made the point where yeah, because next year you're going to have to start trading in division because the divisions are going to be larger. And you're going to have to get used to trading in division if you're going to make moves.
Right. And I think, especially if we, go to kind of the more balanced schedule anyway, then it becomes, you're playing everybody the same amount of games. It's not as if in the past where you'd have to play a division opponent way more than somebody that's out of the division and, have to see that player come to town several times and remind you of why you traded him.
That's also fair because it's going to be a little bit more spread out. With more teams in division, you can't play as many games per team in your division as you could before. It'll be really interesting to see how player protection will go as well, because that might end up becoming a factor when we get to the trade deadline. I feel like hopefully we'll get news about how player protection is going to work at the end of the season before we hit the trade deadline, because I believe that could factor into people making trades. is thinking, I'm not going to be able to protect this player. I might want to trade him now and see what I can get for him in terms of prospects back instead of losing him in the expansion draft.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll start hearing some news about how that expansion draft will work, because I think it'll add a little bit of spice to the trade deadline before we get there. So next season's going to be crazy with this expansion team. We're gonna you're gonna have to stay plugged into this YouTube channel and subscribe, click the notification bell. Please do. We want to grow this channel, but we're gonna, as the season goes on and we get more expansion news, we're definitely going to be talking about it, because that's going to be probably the most exciting thing that happens ever in eMLB, and that's including the amateur draft every year, which we agree is the best part of any eMLB season, is the amateur draft. But expansion draft might be even more exciting, because I'm sure Commission's going to put on a production for the expansion draft as well, which will be even crazier than the eMLB amateur draft, because teams are going to be like, what players am I going to lose instead of what players am I going to gain?
Yeah, and you have contracts that are going to factor in there, I'm sure. And that's going to play a big role in who you're willing to, let out there to potentially be taken.
Yeah, so we'll have more discussion on that front as we have more news made available. Like I said, I hope we get more news soon, so it might influence some trade negotiations as we hit the trade deadline. But for now, 2 months into the season, no one has really completely separated themselves from the rest of the pack, except maybe Houston. I don't want to say anything too soon, because Detroit and the Cardinals were pulling away real early last year, and we both know how that ended up. Cardinals just making a wild card berth, and Detroit not even making the playoffs at all. So who knows what could happen? Astros could fall back down to earth. I had to put one more in there. I had to. But once again, thank you guys so much for joining us for another edition of the eMLB Insider. This has been the May recap and power rankings, as we are 2 months now into the season. Look forward to doing some more episodes as the season picks up again, now that Kamish is back from his well-deserved vacation. And we look forward to doing more episodes in the future. Stay plugged into all of the eMLB content. Make sure to follow Kamish's Twitch channel, link in the description. Also, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for this channel so you will not miss any of these episodes. Any Here's Why You're Wrong episodes led by Aiden and Brendan, as well as we are putting up recorded stream VODs from our games of the night from Twitch. So if you do miss them on Twitch, you can come over here. Eventually they'll make it up on the YouTube channel, not necessarily right away. There's editing work that goes into it, because the freaking kitty cat dance every time it goes off, I have to edit out. So it's actually not that hard with YouTube. They help find where all the songs are, and it helps you edit out, so I don't have to actually go through all the videos and find them, which thank goodness for. But anyway, regardless, that's a copyright apparently. Every time that sub alert goes off, I'm like, oh well, another edit. Anyway,
editing time for Anjou.
That's right. Honestly, the longest part of it is the processing. Once I say what to edit out, that's the part that takes the longest. But anyway, I digress. I'm getting way off topic. Please subscribe, follow the channel. Get plugged into the eMLB, whether you are a GM or a potential community-created player. If you are a supporter of the channel, please stay plugged into everything. We enjoy doing this, so hopefully you all enjoy watching as well. But until next time, this has been JR and Andrew, and we'll see you guys next time. Hello, eMLB. Great start. Can't even speak properly. All right. Let's try this again.
Take two.
Yeah. And action.